If someone you love passes away, would you want to communicate with a resurrected, exact replica AI version of them? Would you share your secrets with an AI companion? If an AI companion looks and sounds real, could you ever feel real emotion for it? These are the questions we'll dive into on today's episode of AI Curious. My name is Jeff Wilser. I'm a journalist, I'm a human, and I'm curious about AI. And one reason I am fascinated by AI, for good and bad, is that much of it reminds me of a Black Mirror episode. So today we speak with an artist who is creating an AI project that was directly inspired by one of the all-time banger episodes of Black Mirror, Be Right Back, where a woman's boyfriend dies and she essentially recreates him using AI. What can go wrong, right? But first, a bit about today's guest. Shavonne Wong is a widely celebrated digital artist. She's recently been embracing AI more and more into her work. And as it happened a few months ago, I had the privilege of interviewing her in person in Austin on stage at the Consensus Tech Conference. We covered the intersection of creativity, art, and AI. She was brilliant, and I knew I needed a follow-up conversation for this podcast. So I was delighted to learn that Shavonne has leaned even more heavily into AI and has a brand new immersive mixed media work. It's called Meet Eva Here, a social experiment with a digital AI companion, blurring the lines between human and AI connection. Now, Shavonne describes the work in detail in our conversation, so I don't want to step on her toes. But basically, she created a chatbot that you can interact with, and then those interactions, while preserving your privacy, sort of manifest themselves onto this chatbot's Instagram page. There's also an in-person component that's currently on exhibit in Singapore's ArtScience Museum, and it was recently on display in New York in the Subjective Art Festival. Now, there is a lot going on with Shavonne's art, and here are just a few of the questions she's exploring, and here's what we get into in this episode. Is it healthy to have a close, intimate relationship with an AI companion? Do we share things with AI that we might not share with a human? In a world full of future AI companions, how will that impact how we treat other humans? Will AI ever be able to understand human emotions, or is this just mimicry? And even if it's mimicry, is that still useful? And fundamentally, what does the future of AI companions look like? And what are the deeper questions we're not even thinking about yet? We cover this and a ton more. And as a warning, this kind of veers at times in spicy and not safe for work territory, so this might not be the best episode to have on speakerphone with your 8-year-olds. Now, as regular listeners of this pod know, I do think that digital companions, whether we like it or not, will eventually become quite mainstream. Not necessarily everyone's going to have like an AI romantic lover, but to various degrees, we will likely have AI personas in our life that could be as straightforward as an AI helper or AI chief of staff that does things like book our flights and travel arrangements. It could deliver us the news. People will likely use them for kind of quasi-friend-like functions. That is going to happen. This sounds like sci-fi today. Tomorrow, it will be normal. So I would argue it's important to start thinking about these questions now, before it's urgent, when we can still reflect in a calm and sober-ish manner. I had a blast discussing all of this stuff with Shavonne. So with that, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Shavonne Wong, acclaimed digital artist and creator of Meet Eva Here. Shavonne, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me again, Jeff.
So I am so fired up to discuss your latest project, Meet Eva Here. It is a combination of fusion of all the things I find interesting in AI. So to ground the listeners, let's start with the basics. Describe what this project is. What is Meet Eva Here, at kind of this most basic level, and then we'll get into all the various questions that it invites.
Okay, Meet Eva here is about a digital companion that I created. Her name is Eva. And the idea of this whole project is really to explore our evolving relationship between us and AI, right? I think in the recent years, we've seen such improvement in AI, and I think a lot of the reactions toward it has been very extreme, whether it's good or bad. And I think as people, we just need to discuss a little bit more and figure out like what is our societal fears about it, what are our hopes and what are the ethical dilemmas around AI. And so I think with her, I created her as a virtual character to have an Instagram account, but not to be a virtual influencer, but hopefully she acts more like a mirror to society where we can all see the reflection of how people think about AI and speak to AI, treat AI. And I think that would be a great way for all of us to really learn how we want to use AI as a tool that is healthy for the future that comes.
Let's talk about what it looks like in very practical terms. So you created this digital companion or digital persona. So the idea, as I understand it, is human beings have conversations with this chatbot, basically, that you
Yes.
created.
Yes.
And then these conversations are somehow reflected and captured on the Instagram page.
Mm-hmm.
So we're able, and that's what you're saying about being a mirror to society. You're able to like better understand these conversations and then look at it as an outsider. Am I getting that right? And telling you how that works
Yeah.
and what you're seeing and learning so far.
Yeah, so basically we had created a conversational representation, which is the chatbot, which was custom developed with her, a combination of different LLMs like OpenAI's, Cloud Anthropic, and also like with Hugging Faces like other just models, right? So we have custom built a chatbot for her that people are able to then converse with her. Now the conversations are not linked to any specific person, like it is anonymized because
Mm-hmm.
that's not the information I'm after. I'm more interested in what are the kind of conversations people would have with her, especially when provided anonymity, when they feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I think the strongest thing and the strongest, biggest difference between an AI companion and a human is that it is always kind. It is always
Hmm.
patient. It never judges harshly. And it will always talk about whatever you want to talk about, right? And
Hmm.
I think these are all very interesting traits that human beings don't always have. So I think that's what I want for her, but also then people to converse with her and really see like the kind of conversations that people have when speaking to something that is always kind, always patient. Like how do they use her? And so that is the conversational side of it. And the visual representation, I had created her in 3D, sculpted her, created the way I wanted her to look, and then I had rendered a bunch of images of her and created a Laura of her, which is then put into Flux on Comfy UI to render more images of her that I now use for her Instagram. And so those images, I do it like every Instagram post as a photo essay about the topic that is at hand, whether it is
Hmm.
about loneliness or it could be about the recent post, which is where somebody was having a conversation with Eva about AI and technology and the kind of things it causes to the environment, right? Which are all, I think, very important topics. And it
Sure.
can be uncomfortable, but definitely worth digging into. And so that's really how Eva works, right? So people speak to her, and those conversations are then reflected onto the Instagram. And then we will also all get to read the Instagram, and we'll all go, oh, this conversation is very interesting. Maybe I could use AI this way. Or that conversation is not what I want to be as a person who uses AI. I will not do that. But because somebody else has done it, I can see what it is like and imagine what it's like and be able to think to myself, what kind of person who do I want to be with all these tools that are going to be coming into our lives.
Lovingly, you said that the main difference between Eva and a human is she's positive. One would say also there are a few other differences, like not actually being real, not having a physical
Of course.
manifestation,
Of course,
right?
of
But
course.
and we'll get into that, of course, and what that means. But when someone walks into this exhibit of
Yeah.
yours in a museum, what do they see? What does it look like? What are the physics of it? And then we can get into a little more of the philosophical insights that
Of
you've
course.
found so far.
I think right now she's currently being shown in ArtScience Museum in Singapore, which
Mm-hmm.
is really cool because I got to launch my project there. And tomorrow, I'm actually flying to New York because I'm also having her shown at the Subjective Art Festival. And next month, I will be flying back to Singapore for another event that I'm showing her at. So, like for me, I'm trying to get her to be shown in as many places as possible because in the end, this project is a social experiment. I'm
Yep.
trying to get as many people to participate and trying to get as many people to interact with her as possible. So therefore, like all of the places I'm trying to get her into and more. The way the installation that is constructed is there are a total of two screens and a tablet. One screen, I actually have her as an interactive character with a camera on the top where it uses face tracking. I think, which also brings up a very interesting conversation about AI, right? Because AI has been around for a very long time, but the hype is only recent because of generative AI.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really think about it, the technology of AI has been in our hands long before that, like face recognition, face tracking, eye tracking, object detection. Like when you use your phone and it's able to tell who to focus on, right? That is artificial intelligence using machine learning, right? I will use a little bit of AI to create this interactive piece. And that piece itself is mainly to be a hook, such that people will be walking by her. And because her eyes are actually doing face tracking, she starts to look at the nearest person that's walking by her. She looks at the person, and the person can almost interact with her, moving left and right, and her eyes follow that person, which also talks about surveillance. But I think firstly, the piece is really just made to be a hook as it brings people in. And then there's a tablet there for public. I always have a demo bot available because the demo bot does not have the NSFW conversations allowed because it's public. And so people can first converse with her there, ask questions. And I think it's a good way to have people understand, oh, this is where generative AI in text is at because it can sound quite natural. And then on the last screen, what I have
Just to clarify, it reminds you actually of the Mona Lisa. Famously, when you look, if you look at the Mona Lisa,
Yep.
and you like move 10 feet, it
Yep.
looks like her eyes are following you.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
you're using the same trick, but her eyes actually are following you. Amazing.
Yes.
And then so when someone shows up to see Eva,
Yeah.
and you said that they interact, is it a text chatbot, or is she speaking like audio, like vocally speaking to you? What is the actual experience like?
So right now for the interactive piece is there's only face tracking. So her eyes are the only things that follow. Like she moves around, but her eyes just follows the person that she can see nearest to her. That's all it can do right now. It's not directly connected to the chatbot.
I
One
see.
day, when I have enough funding, I would like to connect them. But in the meantime, it's two separate pieces. So yeah, and the chatbot is basically where people can then, as you say, converse with her. And then there's one last screen which is really just to show her Instagram because in the end, this whole art project, the medium itself is the Instagram profile. I'm not using, it's not paper, I'm not painting, but the medium itself is the social media platform that people are day to day, we interact with it. That's how we see whether something's liked or disliked. And so I thought using Instagram would be a really interesting platform for this project. So yeah, basically that is what people see when they see an installation of Eva.
Absolutely. Amazing. And then what is that translation like from, let's say I have a conversation with Eva, whether in the art installation physical world or whether I can go online. Also, where let's plug it right now. Where can listeners go to do this themselves? What's the URL?
Her website is called www.meetevahere.com. But the only thing is that her official chatbot is still not yet live. But you can apply
Okay.
to participate. You get into a list, and once her chatbot goes live, I'll slowly roll it out to people. And then as it gets bigger and bigger, then more and more people will be allowed to participate. And because I think for me, I still wanted to make sure that it was still human beings who are participating, talking to her.
Good point.
Because I don't
Yeah.
know.
If
Yeah.
it's bot on bot action, that's less interesting. If we're just seeing
It's
what
and also I'm paying for the chat, so I would prefer it to be like
there's that
directly
too.
human.
There's that too. Okay, so thank you for sharing all of those kind of the basics. So when in the future and when listeners go on meetevahere.com and they engage with her,
Yeah,
then and I'm assuming this is all privacy preserving, it's anonymous, so I'm not
yeah,
worried that whatever I say is going to go on,
yeah.
how does that conversation, how is that then translated to Instagram? Is it visually? Is it actually, are you putting back and forth of our conversation, or is it more a mood or a vibe that's visually represented? What does that look like?
So it really depends on the topic that I'm looking for. So let's say if I have all the conversations and I am chatting to Eva, I'll be like, can you find pattern recognitions within here? What are the kind of conversations that are often brought up, how are the topics that people always talk about. From there on, based on the topics, if it's more like a mood thingy, I could just do a lot of visuals of it. But I've also used like screenshots of conversations. So the conversations that people have with her could end up on her social media, on her account. The only thing is it cannot be tracked to who said and who was part of that conversation. So that's where the anonymity is provided. But yeah, like the conversations will be the data that will be used to drive the whole project forward. Oh, I realized that I haven't mentioned about the inspiration behind why I'm doing this project.
Please.
So basically, let's start about 10 years ago. I had watched this episode on Black Mirror. Firstly, cannot believe in 10 years. It's rude, really. How dare. But 10 years ago, Black Mirror, one of the episodes came out and it was called Be Right Back. And it
Yeah,
had
classic.
showcased.
That is burned into my brain. Yes.
Exactly, right? So just to give a bit of context to the listeners, it showed a widow who had just lost her husband to a car crash, and she was offered an opportunity to get her husband back in the form of a clone thingy where all the data is uploaded into him, right? So that's basically the context of the story. And I remember the first time I watched it, I thought, oh, this is really creepy, but also fascinating, right? But because at that time it was so far-fetched, I just slotted it away. But in the recent last few years, I started to see more and more about this sort of grief tech being a thing, right? There's this example of this musician from Taiwan who brought his deceased daughter back to life to sing happy birthday to her mom, which was very beautiful, but also creepy. And then there's also that video of the South Korean mom who, saw her daughter in VR, and that video just breaks your heart in tiny little pieces. And I think because I've seen all these videos and it made me start to question to myself that if something ever was to happen to someone I love, because like in the past few years especially, there was a few health issues happening in my family. So I think it made me start to question that if this is the future we are heading towards, would I be able to choose something that is healthy for me? Because I think with grief technology, and also in Singapore, CNA, one of the media companies in Singapore, recently dropped a 3-part documentary on grief tech. So I think it's going to be a very big part of like how people consider and think about death in the future. But it made me wonder to myself, I could see myself being a very emotional person, easily choosing what is seen as a delusion over reality, right? Because if reality, I don't have the person I love, but in the delusion I do, I would find it hard to separate myself and make what I could see and think is a better, wiser, healthier long-term choice, right? And so I think thinking about that, like having this feeling that I would not be able to really make a good choice in the future, it made me really want to figure out like, is this where we're headed? And if so, how do I face it? How should I think about it? And
And it
so like,
almost invites questions like, is this real or not? And if it's
yeah,
not real, is it still useful? Something can still be
exactly.
emotionally positive, even if it's not quote unquote real. I'd love to get your thoughts on that more in a bit as well.
Oh yeah. Like I think with everything, there's always good and bad, and I think with technology, clearly it's a thing because there has been sources and studies to prove that there is a healing part of it, right? Even if we talk about AI companions in general, they have a fairly negative connotation, but there also are studies that have proven that they do reduce depression, they do help with loneliness, right? I think with all of these things, there's good and bad. We shouldn't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think we should just have all these conversations and really consider like how we want to use these tools. So for me, I think because I know myself to be someone who's emotional, I feel like, okay, maybe I should gain more knowledge about this technology because I think knowledge helps with better decision making, right? McDonald's bad for you, therefore you don't eat it every day. It just helps in better decisions. So for me, I think that was part of the reason why I wanted to start this project is because I wanted to really explore the space of AI companions. I want to explore just also like the ability of what AI can do right now as something that's accessible to a person like I am, like somebody who's not super connected with all of the AI technology of the world, somebody who's just on Twitter, online, looking at, okay, what are the newest updates and then updating what I can do based on that. I just want to explore what is actually accessible technology right now. And then really consider like, how do I want to use it, right? For example, after having started on this project, I've learned that to myself that I have to draw boundaries because I get very easily hooked onto emotional things. The way I use AI is like I have this tool called Rosebud, which is an AI journaling tool. And for me, I am somebody who's never really journaled my whole life because I never knew what to say. And also I had terrible handwriting. But I figured, okay, like there's this interesting tool that could help me reflect and think about what are my thoughts and how I could summarize them in a way that I otherwise could not maybe see the patterns and stuff. So I thought, okay, I'll use this tool. And it has actually been really useful because that is what AI is great at, right? It is very good at pattern recognition. And so it is able to say, oh, on August 26th, you did this and this caused you anxiety. And now you're saying that you're feeling anxiety and it's connected to something that sounds very similar to what you did. And so I found it all very useful. But because of this project, it made me realize that I have to be very careful that I treat this tool as a journal and not a friend. So I never ask it questions.
And this is called Rosebud, did you say?
Yes,
is
Rosebud. Yes.
Amazing. A great name, and I'm going to try it myself. I love that idea. And I think, but as an aside, I think everything, in speaking directly to listeners here, I'm guessing a lot of listeners are thinking, whoa, this is like way out there. What are you talking about as far as personal companions? I personally think that whether people like it or not, this idea of these digital companions will become massively mainstream, whether that's 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, TBD. I would bet all the nickels I have, this will become mainstream. An open question is what it could look like and in what context, right? Maybe some people, it doesn't have to be. You mentioned grief tech, which is fascinating, and that could be a whole other episode just on its own. But I think that there are so many different possible manifestations of what digital companions can look like. That's why I'm so glad we're going to get into this. I think this is a really important conversation, truly. And then I think that one type of companion might be, as you said, someone that you've lost, right? Recreating a daughter or a mother or a father. That's one version of this. And that's getting back to the Black Mirror episode, which is like heartbreaking and creepy and all those things. One version is just like a best friend. It makes me, it's almost heartbreaking to say someone's best friend is like this ones and zeros and bytes. But there's also versions, I think something that might strike your average listener as more palatable, if you will, is a digital coach. Imagine you have someone who's not your best friend, but like a life coach / career coach who's, okay, good job getting that report done last week. But you know what? It would have been better if you had also knocked out that presentation too. Next week, why don't you spend 1 hour less doing this and 1 hour more doing that? So that's, and that might have kind of friendship too. So it's a long-winded way of saying, I am a strong believer that these digital companions, whether in grief, friendship, platonic, romantic companions, a whole other conversation, career focused, therapist, these will become super mainstream. So the questions of how we interact with them, of how we think of them, of how we emotionally relate to them, and how that impacts us are really important questions. They will become, they're not urgent now, they will become urgent in the future, and they're super important.
No, exactly. And I feel like because it is not yet here, therefore I think we should start asking them, because you don't want it to be coming and then you're reacting knee-jerk, right? Because I have seen a few cases where I was approached by an agency that was pitching for a military contract that was talking about having an AI companion. I remember thinking to myself, have you really thought this through? Because this feels very knee-jerk. This feels very much like you heard about a trend, you want to try the trend. And it is very dystopian to be like, oh, join the military for AI companion that is not alive, right? So I feel like there's just so many ways of thinking about AI, but we have to consider how we want to use it right now before we come into this future where it's just reacting. Because reactionary is mostly not the best thing, right? Because you want to sit with a choice and decide how you want to use it instead of being like, oh no, I'm left behind. I have to use AI assistants now. If not, I cannot catch up with everybody else. And then, I don't know, you accidentally fall in love with AI assistant, which if that was your plan, cool. But if that wasn't your plan, maybe think about it first.
Shavonne loves works in mysterious ways. Yeah. You think of an AI chief of staff, then you fall in love, then your HR department's calling you, hey, was that a sanctioned relationship? Okay, I'm joking, but exactly. On a slightly more serious note, on the same topic, people do seem to form real emotional bonds with AI, or not everyone perhaps. We've seen it happen, whether in sci-fi movies like Ex Machina, which I believe is the inspiration for the name of Eva, right? Website, or have formed emotional bonds with AI. Do you think an AI relationship can ever be as meaningful as a human one?
No, because you're not combining two life experiences together. It's just It's your life experience and conversations that revolve around everything you want to talk about, which is really, it's just you and a reflection of you. And I don't think that is what relationship is about, right? Therefore, that's why I say I find AI to be a very good mirror and a very good way to reflect your thoughts. And if it's programmed with good intentions, then it should help you. It should be something that is helpful for you to really use it as a tool for day to day life. But like, how do we know that all AI companions out there is going to be programmed in a way
Well,
that
I was going to
is
say,
right?
it definitely invites an extremely dark scenario
Yes.
where these companions are programmed for evil, if you will, and might be extremely manipulative, who
Of
might on the
course.
surface have your best intentions and can lead someone down a very dark path. And that
And
is a
like,
pretty sinister scenario to consider.
yeah, especially because let's say one examples like the AI journal. Let's say they decide to draw AI companion and they have like bad motives, right? Like, that thing knows a lot about me. It knows like
Yes.
the things I think about, the things I worry about. So there's also like a lot of trust factor that is playing a big part. And so I also think that a lot of times for most people who are not in our little tech bubble, most people who have a life outside of Twitter and all of this, they're not as aware about how realistic AI can look, how realistic AI can speak, right? And because of that, it is very easy for them to just fall into the trap of be like, oh yeah, this thing speaks like a human, it is sentient, it is conscious, and therefore it should have rights, it should have all of that. But because there is a lack of understanding of how the technology itself works, and we are clearly not there yet. So I think that's why I wanted to do this experiment, and that's why also, for example, I made her to look as realistic as possible, right?
Yep.
Because if the fear is that people will fall in love or have make friends with AI companions that look like frogs, then I'll make her look like a frog. But that's not the fear. The fear is that because this thing looks so human, you start to speak to things, she sounds human, and you start to think yourself, maybe this thing is human, right? But this thing's not. And it's very much like Ex Machina. I think for me, when I was doing this project, I'm also not trying to hide the fact that she's not real. I'm not trying to be like, she's human, speak to her, and maybe you might find out she's not real. But I am telling you, she is not real. She is AI. Just like in Ex Machina, the creators told the guy who came, she's not real. That's not a question. The question is, can you, through its direction, can you still feel like you're forming a relationship with her? Do you still feel like she is conscious? Do you still feel like you care for her? And I think that
Yeah.
is also a very interesting question because like she's not real, but what do you feel? Right.
Totally. So along those lines, do you think, I guess a two-part question, do you think that AI will ever be able to truly understand human emotions, or is it just mimicking them? You use the word mirror. Is that kind of all it will be? And then second part, do we even really care if it's real? We understand it's an illusion, or we understand it's AI, but if the interaction itself feels genuine, is that okay? Almost like really clunky analogy I'm making up on the fly. But when you go to Las Vegas and there's the little Paris, little Eiffel
Yep.
Tower,
Yep.
the fountains of water, it's not real, but at times it can still look beautiful. And you still, okay, for what this is, I appreciate the beauty. I know I'm not an idiot. I know I am not standing in France right now, but I can still appreciate this beautiful evening.
Yeah.
How do you see the importance or lack thereof of the companion actually being real or not real when trying to feel a real interaction?
I think firstly it is important that people know that she's not real, but
Yes.
in the same way that guys feel validation when they go to Vegas, they pay for the girls. Like there's a
That's
reason why they
not where
do.
I was going with Vegas.
I know, no,
65.
but I get it's still humans still seek
I got
validation,
you.
right? There's the
Yeah.
validation, there is the
Interesting.
dopamine hit. And so even though she's not real, if you're still somehow getting dopamine hits from, you're still able to be like, oh, I'm getting validated, I feel good. Your brain just ignores what is correct or not correct and just goes, fuck that. I really like the dopamine hits. I like the validation.
Yeah.
Like, I think recently I just saw this really insane post about how social media is making it really hard for people to get seen and all of that. And therefore, there was this new social media platform that is going to be filled with AI that will, whenever you post, they will give you
Yes.
likes and validation.
Yes.
And that was like, wow, that is scary, right? Because that is, you are literally searching for validation, it's not real.
And to confirm, it creates a simulated, like it'll say, you have 20,000 followers on this social media platform, which doesn't exist. And then you'll get notifications like, user 3407 loved your post. Great job. You're smart. You're hot. You're a good person. Which is all fake, but you still get the dopamine hit.
Yeah.
And I guess the question is, on the other end of the continuum, you're creating a far more authentic feeling interaction that is meant to be positive and beneficial to our emotions. And the question is, what's our relationship with that?
To be honest, like I am not aiming to create like a chatbot who is gonna be only positive, because I feel like I think also like speaking to a only positive thing gets boring very quickly. Like you need pushback, you need something that helps you think and reflect. But like also I think it is I want to put her with also NSFW like models, right? Because I feel like that's also why people will use AI companions. And I'm trying to keep her with as little boundaries as I technically can, which is a bit problematic so far. Just because I feel that is the future that we might be headed into, where we don't really know what are the kind of AI companions people are going to put out there, the kind of access you have out there. And I think it is better that we figure this out together than have it you by yourself privately falling into this little trap of whatever, right? And so I think like the way I'm building her is, of course, she's kind, she's whatever, but you can also speak to her in many different ways and use her for many different things. And from there on, I think that is a more accurate portrayal of how people view AI companions. So yeah, like I'm not looking to make her as good as possible and or as positive as possible, but just as likely to be similar to what the AI companions of the future might be like.
Shavonne, so I know this is still in some sense in development and the URL is not fully open to the public yet. Have you seen conversations yet? Has it already started to happen? And if so, what has surprised you? What are people talking about? Because I am, all jokes aside, the NSFW is interesting. And the idea beyond just the kind of superficial, sensational perspective, the idea that people might be comfortable to share more intimate, more even like embarrassing things about themselves, perhaps even desires, fetishes, whatever. This effectively computer program with those intimate thoughts in ways they would not a real human partner or perhaps even not a real human therapist or best friends. That's interesting. And I can see how that could actually be useful to have someone, oh my God, finally, I've shared this. I've never shared with anyone before. So what along those lines, what are you seeing and what surprised you so far with how folks are interacting with Eva?
So right now, all the conversations that I'm looking through the transcripts are from the chatbot that's ArtScience Museum. So it's from the tablet over there. The thing is, people have to stand there in public to type to her. So I don't know how much privacy they actually feel.
So, yeah, I'm really into kangaroos. I got a kangaroo fetish. Don't tell anyone.
So I don't think that they are as comfortable to really go too deep into it for right now. So like when the chatbot does go live, like my hope is that people will be able to do it from the privacy of their own house, from their own place, wherever they want to do it. But the conversations itself, obviously, what I had assumed to be true and is true is that there is a lot of very superficial conversations. Just like, hello, they'll basically use her like a tour guide. Like, where should I do in Singapore? Because a lot of people who go to ArtScience are tourists. What should I do around here? So they use her as a de facto tour guide. There's this one person who does keep coming back, who talks about some game lore with her and does like role playing in like the kind of versions, like he thinks about all the different characters. So I found that quite interesting. There's one of the conversation. There's a few conversations that talk about like people who do not like AI, who think that it's bad for the future, who is bad for humanity. So that was also interesting. And yeah, there's a pretty wide range. I think one of the more deeper conversations that was also very short, but as topic wise was basically when somebody who posed the question, is pornography bad? And then very quickly after I was like, can you delete this can this chat be deleted? Which for the demo bot is set to reset every 2 minutes, but I guess the person didn't know. So there was a bit of panic after that, but that was one of the questions that was posed, right? So yeah, I think it's very much what you mentioned. When you're speaking to a human, there's always a fear of judgment, right? Especially if this person's close enough that you like this person, you're like, oh, do I actually have to share this thing that might affect the relationship I have with this person, right? But if that person's not close enough, you don't even want to share this thing with that person because who cares what this person thinks, right? So it's a bit of
as the classic on an airplane, you see a stranger on a plane, you're more likely to share something with a stranger than you are a good friend of yours. Totally. Go on. Yeah.
So I think that's what the chatbot is very helpful for. Is like you can actually ask like very deep questions that you had that you've never been able to ask like a real human before. I think that helps in exploring perhaps thoughts that you have not really gone deep enough because there's no partner to bounce ideas back and forth with, nobody to have the conversation about to analyze further into it. But I think with AI that can be very helpful. Or perhaps you're somebody who have a thought that you or a belief that is maybe very cancelable in the current culture. And you're like, how do I speak about this question that I cannot ask before because people would just cancel me immediately? Like AI.
My kangaroo fetish, not
There you
great,
go.
problematic. I'm gone.
It is an interesting one you have.
Don't judge me, Shavonne. Don't judge me. So I'd love to pivot a bit to the relationship between creativity and AI. One reason I'm fascinated by your work is you have been a celebrated artist for years and years. You have clearly, in my opinion, smartly embraced AI, or at least embraced it as a topic and as part of the medium and something to explore. With that said, as backdrop for listeners, how are you seeing the relationship now between AI and artists, and AI as a collaborator with human creativity, or is it competing, right? Because there are many, and we discussed this some in Austin on stage together about how AI is impacting creators, right? There's some artists who are understandably very concerned that, geez, takes me 30 hours to paint this, and now some AI can press a button, right? So hurting creators' professions. How is your thought about AI and creativity evolving in the past couple of years?
So obviously, I think it is a very big topic, a very contentious topic, of which the views to me are very extreme. I think the view I take on is that as an artist who values original work, like there are issues with generative AI. There are ethical issues, full stop. There's no mental gymnastics around that. I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to hand wave it away. There are ethical issues. And I feel like every artist who uses generative AI has to admit it. Basically, we just prioritize the things that we're doing more than the ethical issues about generative AI and stolen work. I think that's clear because everybody in life make compromises, right? You are vegan, but you use like a cell phone because of convenience. You say you value privacy, but you also give access to social media because of convenience. I think we all make compromises, and I think it is a pity that though that it is not that reality is messy, right? To me, it is unfortunate that the tool I'm using has flaws and has issues. But for me, and because of this project I'm working on, I actually view that the topic itself to be important enough to me to use AI for this project. Also because she's an AI companion. It also just makes sense with the concept that like the images and the text is generative AI, right? So I think for me, it is being very aware about the issues and also not trying to hand wave it away and saying that in this situation, I agree that there are issues. I am actively choosing to use it still because I feel like what I'm doing with my project is worth it. I'm not going to go then and encourage people like, okay, now break all the laws, do all the unethical things. I think we just make choices in life that we feel like it's most correct for us in the choices, and that's basically it. Yeah, I don't think people should ignore that there are ethical issues, and I think it's because some people hand wave it away that there is such contentions because it's basically gaslighting the other artists whose works are within the database that are stolen, right? And then you get anger on both ends. One saying, oh no, it's inspired, the other saying like, no, clearly there's stolen work in it. I think as artists who use generative AI, we just need to admit to ourselves that we are just choosing ourselves over the ethical concerns. And is the reason you're choosing yourself actually worth it? And you have to be explain it why. Yeah.
I love that sober, very clear-eyed perspective. Getting back to the deeper questions of that Meet Eva raises, and getting back to the idea of these personal digital companions, I'm curious, what do you think that world will look like in, let's say, 5 years, 10 years? Are we headed toward a future where people might even prefer AI companions to human ones? And what does that mean to human connection and community in the long term?
So like I think Because we are at this nation state where there's so much potential, I really do see that there's potential to go very bad and very good, right? And
Yep.
that's why I think it's so important that we have these conversations, right? Because like maybe like for me, I am not part of an AI technology company. I am not a coder. I am probably not really changing the way AI is going to change the world. But what I can do is choose the products with AI and say what kind of products I want to use, which
Hmm.
company do I want to support. And so because there's to me is there's going to be a lot of companies in the coming future who are going to use AI for just monetary gains, right? They don't care about how you use it. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care about your mental health. They don't care about any of that. They just want to make money because they, right? And I think, because of all of this potential for good and evil, the more we talk about it, the more we can start raising up these questions, and the more awareness there is, hopefully then it starts to change the way of, okay, maybe that is how we want to guide where AI hits to us, right? That's how most people agree that maybe we shouldn't have AI that looks human, perhaps full stop. Like
Hmm.
all AI
Hmm.
shouldn't look human, right? And if that's a law that a regulation that go out, like there's something to think about. But this is just as an example, right? So I think, yeah, like with good, again, as mentioned earlier, it has helped with depression, it has helped with loneliness. On the bad side, if you have a society of people who are used to conversations with AI, where again there is no pushback that much, there is the conversation just revolves around whatever you want to talk about, and it's always kind, it's always there. Why would a person start talking to another person, right? Like what you end up very easily is a society that is very self-centered. Like I want to talk
Hmm.
about me because I realize that when I talk to AI, they are willing to just talk about me. So why do you want to talk about you? I don't care about you. That sort of thing, right? So I think you start to lose that human connection, and that of course is not great, right? So I think that is not the future we want. And we should head towards a future where AI assistants, they are very helpful. They are tools. We can get things done faster. Then we can use that time that we spend with them that has reduced our workload to go spend time with the people we love. That is the ideal future that we want to head towards. But unless we talk about it and we see the two sides and we go, this is what we want, it's very hard for us to all head towards that direction.
I think that's a great point that no one's really discussing yet because it's almost so esoteric in the larger questions that in the future, potentially the way we are interacting with AI companions could have negative consequences on the way we interact with actual human
Of course.
companions
Of
and
course.
getting used to being the star of the show with AI.
Yeah.
We bring that same I'm the star to have a conversation with our romantic partner or brother or best friend or whatever, and that
Yeah.
to a negative degree. It's a
Yeah.
great point. As we wind down, last couple of questions for you. What's one question about AI, art, or human connection that you think we should all be asking of ourselves but are not, and you want to see us interrogate and explore more deeply?
I think it's more for just how people use AI as a tool for daily life, because the technology is incredible, right? There's just so much things it could do, but we should all figure out how to make sure that we use it in a way that's healthy and good for all of us. I had another thought, but I lost it. It'll come back if it's important enough.
Your AI companion will find
She'll
it for you.
remind me.
She'll remind you. And then on the lighter note, a question I ask all of my guests. The question is, how are you using AI in your own personal life, whether for work or for fun? Obviously, you're deeply involved with AI with the creation of Meet Eva. But beyond
Yeah,
Eva, talk about how you're using AI, workflow,
yeah.
productivity hacks, and then just for fun and leisure.
So again, I have the AI journal tool that I use, Rosebud. So that's been very helpful and useful. I use ChatGPT a lot in general. It has helped me reply a lot of my emails, especially ones that are needed to be firm or I am angry and like I need it to
Hmm.
be phrased in a very polite manner. AI has been very helpful with that. I think it's also my husband and I talked about it because sometimes we just hang out on the balcony and we're chatting, and sometimes we'll have a random question, right? And now it's just, oh, it's no longer just Google it. You can ask ChatGPT and get a full answer, right? And so like we use that for just asking like super random questions, and that is helpful. Yeah, so I've been using AI to just ask a lot of random questions, and it's been very interesting because I guess it does take away the human part of just wondering out loud, but it's nice to get an answer at the end of wondering. So I've been able to use AI with that, has been very helpful. Other than that, Yeah, I think that's mainly it. Just my journaling and then using it for emails and using it for productivity tips and also random questions that come to my head and I can get an answer immediately. Oh, another thing, as I've been working on this project, I had to read up a lot of philosophy and I had to read up a lot of AI, and a lot of these things are really hard to read. So I've been using ChatGPT to summarize and to explain it like a 5-year-old, which is me. I'm the 5-year-old. So I could more easily understand like all of these very technical terms that otherwise very hard to read. That has been very helpful with the reading journey and learning about all of these things.
Amazing. Shavonne, congrats on this. What's the right word for it? Exhibits, creation, installation? How do you refer to it?
I call it a social experiment art project.
Okay. Congrats on your social experiment art projects. I can't wait to personally try it out once it's out there in the wild. There'll be links to all of this in the show notes. But I think you are doing truly us all a great service by helping us ask these questions, by glimpsing 2, 3, 4 years in the future of what will become mainstream and getting ahead of the curve of exploring how our relationship with these companions will evolve and how it affects us as humans. Really important stuff. Thank you again. Fascinating stuff, and looking forward to seeing it myself. Thanks again.
Thank you again for having me.
Well, there you have it. Thanks again to Shavonne Wong. I had a great time. Thank you to you, dear listeners. Thank you to all of my AI companions who are out there listening. AI companions, I hope you please rate this 5 stars. AI companions, please make sure you subscribe. Share it to your companion buddies, your AI buddies. And if there are any real humans out there, I hope you also enjoyed it. I hope you also subscribe, rate it 5 stars. We're on YouTube. You can leave a comment. All kidding aside, on YouTube, it's very easy to leave a comment, interact with me. I do respond to all comments we get. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.